Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. Please remember to like the video and make sure that you're still subscribed. So, just a few orders of business. I forgot to give Natural Progressive a shout out the other day on the live stream. She is close to 1,000 followers, subscribers on her YouTube channel. She's trying to get to 1,000. So that she can continue to make her channel, viable. We don't know what the new YouTube rules and policies, how they're going to affect smaller channels. It used to be that you had to have 1,000 subscribers to do a live stream. I think she does live stream, so I don't know if they changed that or not. Not sure. But anyways, go on over to the Natural Progressive and subscribe to her channel if you are not already subscribed. She does lots of climate change, good climate change content. Also, I am now officially on Rockfin, which is a content provider. It's like subscription content provider. It's on blockchain. They do offer free content, but they also offer exclusive content. Anyways, it's just as a backup to this channel because we don't know what's going on with YouTube and how it's going to affect some channels. And also, things could... It seems that their squashing of alternative information is ramping up. So as kind of a backup and an alternative to YouTube, I'm going to start posting videos on Rockfin, so you can download the app. Download the Rockfin app to watch my videos, and I'm going to be trying to put some exclusive content on that channel as well. It's Black Bear News at Rockfin, rockfin.com. So yeah, let's get into some stuff. So COP25 has ended. There was a lot of disarray around, what should be done, or what's the agreement, or, what do we, how legitimate are the plans to go forward and save the planet? So I'm just, to start with this headline, UN COP25 summit ends with anger, with global warming's window of escape getting harder. Apparently there was some resistance from Brazil and Australia to the 1.5 limit. Major economies have resisted calls for bolder commitments as a UN summit in Madrid has limped towards a delayed conclusion, dimming hopes that nations would act in time to mitigate the impacts of climate change. World leaders have been tasked with setting new emissions reduction benchmarks at COP25 in Madrid, the 25th meeting of the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. But many nations slammed Chile, presiding over the talks, for drafting a summit text that they said risked throwing the 2015 Paris Agreement to tackle global warming into reverse. The Paris Agreement came into force in November 2016 and calls on signatories to drastically reduce emissions to limit global temperature rise to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius before 2100. It also called on wealthier nations to provide developing countries with some financial aid to assist their transitions to cleaner economies. Longtime participants in the talks were outraged at the unwillingness of major polluters, including Australia, to show more ambition with plans to tackle the climate crisis after years of wildfires, cyclones, droughts, and floods. Current national climate plans, if achieved, would lead to a temperature rise of at least 3 degrees. Let me read that again. Current national climate plans, if achieved, would lead to a temperature rise of at least 3 degrees. A level of warming that scientists say could lead to widespread food and water scarcity, more weather disasters, and rising seas. Let me put that into better context. Many think at 4 degrees that we will be extinct. So at 3 degrees, where does that leave us? Probably not in a good place. Um, the European Union, small island states, and many other nations have been calling for the Madrid decision to signal that more than 190 countries participating in the Paris process will submit more ambitious pledges to cut emissions next year. The agreement enters a crucial implementation phase in 2020 when countries are supposed to ratchet up their ambitions ahead of the next major round of talks in Glasgow. So yes, apparently there's a split between, more industrialized countries who are not really committing to a greater level of emissions reductions, but smaller countries and global south, they are, going forward with more adventurous or ambitious plans. And it will also be an adventure. At a time when scientists are queuing up to warn about terrifying consequences if emissions keep rising, and school children are taking to the streets in their millions, what we have here in Madrid is a betrayal of people across the world, said Mohammed Adaw, director of Power Shift Africa, an energy think tank, a climate and energy think tank in Nairobi. So the COP25 talks have not been very productive. They have been met with a lot of protest outside by Extinction Rebellion and school strikers. Nations are not doing enough on the whole. We need, and this is this is one of the problems with the U.S. pulling out of the Paris Accord. It's just obvious that the U.S. is a world leader, one of the most, influential. We're not the largest emitter, but we're probably the second largest. We're pretty large. We're also a world leader, financially and militarily. And if we are not on board with fighting climate change, it kind of leaves the door open to many other industrialized nations to go like, well, maybe we don't care either. And which is infuriating and frustrating on many levels because, all of these nations and all of these corporations and leaders and, the globalists, the global empire of wealth, if you will, understand fully and clearly that climate change is a big problem and that we are going to go down the tubes if we don't do something. That leads me to this next article. How the Rich Plan to Rule a Burning Planet by James Plested. This was sent to me by Michael Campy. This is from December 10th, 2019. We'll see if I can get through this article. It looks pretty long, and I'm already deep into this video. The climate crisis, also, by the way, I changed my desk, so it looks like I'm sitting in a bunker, so this is Black Bear Bunker News. The climate crisis isn't a future we must fight to avoid. It's an already unfolding reality. It's the intensification of extreme weather, cyclones, storms, and floods, droughts, and deadly heat waves. It's burning forests in Australia, the Amazon, Indonesia, Siberia, Canada, and California. It's melting ice caps, receding glaciers, rising seas. It's ecosystem devastation and crop failures. It's the scarcity of resources spreading hunger and thirst. It's lives and communities destroyed and millions forced to flee. The crisis is escalating at a terrifying rate. Every year, new temperature records are set. Every day, new disasters are reported. In Australia, we're living through a summer of dust and fire. Hot winds from the desert are sweeping up dirt and parched landscape, covering towns and cities hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. Creeks and riverbeds are being baked dry. Our cities are shrouded in smoke from fires burning for weeks on end, while on the hottest and windiest days, the flames grow, devouring everything in their path. Do our rulers, the political leaders and corporate elites who, behind the facade of democracy, make all the important decisions about what happens in our society, understand the danger we face? On the surface, they appear unconcerned. In September, after millions of school students participated in the global climate strike and Greta Thunberg gave her "How Dare You" speech at the United Nations, Prime Minister Scott Morrison responded by cautioning against raising the anxieties of children. And by children, he means adults. And when, in November, hundreds of homes were destroyed and 4 people killed by bushfires in New South Wales and Queensland, he told the ABC there was no evidence that Australia's emissions had any role in it and that we're doing our bit to tackle climate change. Is Morrison stupid? Somewhere along the line, it appears his words have become unmoored from reality and are now simply free-floating signifiers spinning out of control in a void of unreason. As the empirical evidence of the devastation being caused by climate change in Australia and around the world mounts, so too does the gulf between this reality and the rhetoric of conservative coal fondlers like Morrison grow into a seemingly unbridgeable chasm. But something is wrong with this picture. To believe that someone in Morrison's position could genuinely be ignorant of the dangers of climate change is itself to give up on reason. The Prime Minister of Australia is among the most well-briefed people on the planet, with thousands of staff at his beck and call to update him on the latest developments in climate science or any other field he may wish to get his head around. The only rational explanation is that Morrison and his like are aware of the dangers posed by climate change, but are choosing to act as though they're not. On first appearance, this might seem like a fundamentally irrational standpoint. It would be more accurate, however, to describe it as evil. Morrison is smart enough to see that any genuine effort to tackle the climate crisis would involve a challenge to the system of free market capitalism that he has made his life's mission to serve, and he has chosen to defend the system. Morrison and others among the global political and business elite have made a choice to build a future in which capitalism survives, even if it brings destruction on an unimaginable scale. And this is true of Donald Trump as well. He understands, he knows it's absolutely true. But, if people believe his words unquestioningly, that's what I was trying to say, then he can just spout whatever nonsense and people will be like, oh, yeah. They are like angels of death, happy to watch the world burn and millions burn with it. They can preserve for themselves in the heavenly realm of a system that has brought them untold riches. This is language that Morrison and evangelical Christian, I didn't know that, should understand. What might be harder for him to grasp is that he's on the wrong side. When seen from this perspective, everything becomes clearer. In the face of the climate crisis, the main priority of the global ruling class and its political servants is to batten down the hatches. Publicly, they're telling school kids not to worry about the future behind the scenes. However, in the cabinet offices, boardrooms, mansions, and military high commands, they're hard at work planning for a future in which they can maintain their power and privilege amid the chaos and destruction of the burning world around them. We are not, as some in the environmental movement argue, all in this together. There are many ways in which the wealthy minority at the top of society are already protected from the worst climate change impacts. Big corporations can afford to spend millions on mitigating climate change risks, ensuring their assets are protected so they can keep their business running even during a major disaster. Businesses and wealthy individuals can also protect themselves by taking out insurance policies that will pay out if their property is damaged in a flood, fire, and other climate-related disasters. They can also pay for their escape bunkers on the moon. Kidding. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they're trying something like that. The rich are also protected from climate change on a more day-to-day level. They tend to live in the leafiest suburbs in large climate-controlled houses. They have shorter commutes to work, where, again, they're most often to be found in the most comfortable air-conditioned buildings. They're not the ones working on farms or construction sites in factories or warehouses struggling with the increasing frequency of summer heat waves. Also see South American farmers who are dying of, kidney failure due to dehydration and other health problems. They're not the ones living in houses with no air conditioning, sweating their way through stifling summer nights. They have pools and manicured lawns and can afford their own large water tanks to keep their gardens green in the hot, dry summer months. What about in the most extreme scenarios where what we might call the natural defenses enjoyed by the wealthy are bound to fail? What happens when the firestorms bear down on their country retreats or rising seas threaten their beach houses? We actually saw that last year, California with Malibu first going on fire, then being flooded. Also Santa Barbara, then being, subject to flooding and mudslides. Money, it turns out, goes a long way. In November 2018, For instance, when large areas of California were engulfed in flames and more than 100 people burned to death, Kanye West and Kim Kardashian hired their own private firefighting crew to save their $50 million Calabasas mansion. How sway. When Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, the city's wealthiest residents evacuated well in advance and hired a private army of security guards from companies such as Blackwater to protect their homes and possessions from the mass of poor, mainly black residents who were left behind. Investigative journalist Jeremy Scahill went to the city in the aftermath of the hurricane and witnessed firsthand the highly militarized and racialized nature of the response. One security contractor hired by a local businessman told Scahill his team had been fired on by black gangbangers, in response to which the contractors unleashed a barrage of bullets in the general direction of the alleged shooters. After that, all I heard was moaning and screaming, and the shooting stopped. Whoa, that was enough. That was it. Enough said. Wow. In the event of disaster, the response of the rich hasn't been to work with others to ensure the collective security of all those affected. It has been to use all resources at their disposal to protect themselves and their property. And increasingly, as in New Orleans, this protection has come in the form of armed violence directed at those less well off, people whose desperation they fear could turn them into a threat. Where am I at? The most forward-thinking of the super rich are aware that they're heading toward a future of ecological and social breakdown, and they're keen to keep ahead of the curve by investing today in the things they'll need to survive. That's why they all need the industrial civilization to keep on going as long as possible, so they can just scoop up all those riches, and somehow gird themselves from disaster. Writing in The Guardian in 2018, media theorist and futurist Douglas Rushkoff related his experience of being paid half his annual salary to speak at a super deluxe private resort on the subject of the future of technology. He was expecting a room full of investment bankers. When he arrived, however, he was introduced to 5 super wealthy guys from the upper echelon of the hedge fund world, Rushkoff wrote. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I had prepared about the future of technology. They had come with questions of their own. Which region will be less affected by the coming climate crisis? New Zealand or Alaska? Finally, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, how do I maintain authority over my security force after the event? Wow. The event, capitalized. That was their euphemism for the environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, unstoppable virus, or Mr. Robot hack that takes everything down. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs, but how would you pay the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered or mutinying, killing their masters and taking their stuff. What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that they knew, or making guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for survival. Woo! There's a reason these conversations go on only behind closed doors. If your plan is to allow the world to spiral towards mass death and destruction while you retreat to a bunker in the South Island of New Zealand or some other isolated area to live out your days in comfort, protected by armed guards whose loyalty you maintain by threat of death, you're unlikely to win much in the way of public support. Better to keep the militarized bunker thing on the lowdown or down low, and keep people thinking that we're all in this together, and if we just install solar panels, recycle more, ride to work, and so on, we'll somehow turn it all around and march arm in arm towards a happy and sustainable future. Yeah, so here's another indicator that we're in trouble. I guess for those that may think that everything's fine and we're just gonna, bump along and, things are much way down the road and, nothing's really that bad. Here's something to indicate that is completely a fallacy, that, we're really in trouble because all of the elite, all of the, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, the government, all of the people, the powers that be, clearly understand that we're in a bad place, and that the event, the bad thing, the big bad thing, is coming soon. There are three main ways in which Australia and other world powers are working towards this. First, they're building their military might, and we just approved a $735 billion military budget in the U.S. that the Democrats actually helped pass, giving Trump, the insane person, that is a Russian plant, giving him all this military budget. Okay. First, they're building their military might, spending billions of dollars on ensuring that they have the best means of destruction at their disposal to help project their power in an increasingly unstable world. Second, they're building walls and brutal detention regimes to make sure borders can be crossed only by those deemed necessary to the requirements of profit-making. Third, they're enhancing their repressive apparatus by passing anti-protest laws and expanding and granting new powers to the police and security agencies to help crush dissent at home. Military strategists have been awake to the implications of climate change for a long time, as early as 2003 in a report commissioned by the Pentagon. U.S. researchers Peter Schwartz and Doug Randall argued that violence and disruption stemming from the stresses created by abrupt changes in the climate pose a different type of threat to national security than we are accustomed to today. Military confrontation may be triggered by a desperate need for natural resources such as energy, food, and water, rather than conflicts over ideology, religion, or national honor. The shifting motivation for confrontation would alter which countries are most vulnerable and the existing warning signs of security threats. More recently, a 2015 U.S. Department of Defense memorandum to Congress argued, climate change is an urgent and growing threat to our national security, contributing to increased natural disasters, refugee flows, and conflicts over basic resources such as food and water. These impacts are already occurring, and the scope, scale, and intensity of these impacts are projected to increase over time. The Australian military has also been preparing for an increasingly unstoppable geopolitical environment driven in part by the impact of climate change. The 2009 Defense White Paper included a section, New Security Concerns, Climate Change, and Resource Scarcity, which pointed to the vulnerabilities of many countries in our region. The paper was explicit in linking these to a possible increase in threats inimical to our interests, and suggested that military capabilities would need to be strengthened accordingly. A 2018 Senate inquiry into the implications of climate change for national security drew similar conclusions. Although discussions about military preparedness are often pitched in terms of the need for increased development assistance, disaster relief, and so on, the practice of the U.S., Australian, and other military powers over the past few decades leaves little room for doubt as to what their role will be. When they're not invading countries on the other side of the world, killing hundreds of thousands, reducing cities to rubble, and imprisoning and torturing anyone who opposes them to secure access to fossil fuels, they're acting as the enforcers of capitalist interests closer to home. Ooh-wee, this is long. Sorry. Where are we? The response to Hurricane Katrina in 2005 is again a good example. When troops from the U.S. National Guard joined the army of private contractors sent to establish security among the death and destruction of the hurricane's aftermath, the Army Times described their role as quashing the insurgency in the city. The paper quoted Brigadier General Gary Jones as saying, "This place is going to look like little Somalia." Wow. We're going to go out and take this city back. Wow. This will be a combat operation to get the city under control. A similar dynamic was at work in Australia when in 2007, the Howard government sent troops to establish order to remote Indigenous communities as part of the racist Northern Territory intervention. The idea that the military could be a force for good in the context of environmental catastrophe and social breakdown is laughable. Whatever is the rhetoric, the role of the military is to secure the interests of a nation's capitalist class in the competitive global scramble for resources and markets. Unless, of course, you get ahead of the curve and turn the military into a peaceful transition force in your own country. Possibilities of that. The hidden hand of the market will never work without a hidden fist. McDonald's cannot flourish without McDonnell Douglas. Ooh, that's a good line. And the designer of the U.S. Air Force F-15, and hidden fist that keeps the world safe for Silicon Valley's technologies to flourish is called the U.S. Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. The military are gangsters for capitalism, and in the future, they're likely to double down on savagery. The next way in which the world's most powerful capitalist states are preparing for climate catastrophe is by massively increasing what's euphemistically called border security. In 2019, Germany celebrated 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall, an event supposedly ushering in a new age of freedom and democracy. In the decades since, however, European countries have built around 1,000 kilometers of new border walls and fences. Sound familiar? 6 times the length of the hated symbol of totalitarianism in Berlin. Most have been constructed since 2015, when millions of Syrians were forced to flee and seek sanctuary in Europe amid a brutal civil war that was triggered in part, at least, by climate change. A 2018 report by the World Bank, Groundswell, preparing for internal climate migration, found that just 3 regions, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia, could generate 143 million climate migrants by 2050. Australia's immediate neighborhood will be affected severely, with several Pacific Island nations forecast to disappear completely under rising seas. Already, in response to the relatively small numbers of refugees who have managed to reach Australia by boat in the past few decades, the Australian government has established one of the world's most barbarous detention programs. Other governments are now following suit. So far, the measures discussed have been those primarily directed outwards by states seeking to defend the interests of their capitalist class in the international sphere. This is in part designed to create an us and them mentality within the domestic population. In Australia, this has been a staple of both Labor and Liberal governments for decades. The idea that the outside world is dangerous, full of terrorists and other bad people whom we should trust the government to protect us from. In the context of growing global instability associated with climate change, we can expect governments everywhere to double down on these xenophobic scare campaigns. The migrants are coming, the Russians are coming, they're all coming to do us harm. This should be resisted at every step, not only for the sake of those others, civilians in Afghanistan, refugees imprisoned on Manus Island, and so on, whose lives the government is destroying in the name of our security, but also the racist fear and the outsider promoted by our governments is designed in large part to draw our attention away from the increasingly direct and open war being waged against the others within. In the years since the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Western governments have expanded and strengthened the state's repressive apparatus. Today we're seeing, as many predicted, how the crackdown on basic freedoms carried out in the name of the war on terror has created a new normal in which anyone opposing the government's agenda becomes a target. Environmental protesters and anyone else standing up against the destructive neoliberal order are now firmly in their sights. In the U.S., the battle to halt the construction of the Dakota Access oil pipeline provides the most extreme example to date. In November 2016, the Native American blockade at Standing Rock was broken up by a police operation so heavily militarized that it looked like something out of the invasion of Iraq. Remember, all of that stuff happened under Obama. In sub-zero temperatures, blockaders were attacked with water cannons, tear gas, rubber bullets, and concussion grenades. Hundreds were injured and many hospitalized. 2 women who were involved in the blockade, who later vandalized the pipeline, are now facing charges under which they could be jailed for up to 110 years. In Australia, we've seen those protesting peacefully outside the international resources and mining conferences in Melbourne face an unusual level of police violence and mass arrests. In Queensland, the state Labor government has passed new laws targeting environmental activists. In early December, 3 members of the Extinction Rebellion were jailed when a magistrate refused them bail, something without precedent for charges related to acts of non-violent civil disobedience. Perhaps nothing provides a better metaphor for the future of our leaders. The future our leaders are steering us towards than a picture taken during Hurricane Sandy in 2012 of the New York City skyline shrouded in the darkness of a blackout. All except one building, which remained lit up like a Christmas tree. That building was the headquarters of global banking giant Goldman Sachs, or the octopus squid, as it is euphemistically known as, where, protected by a mountain of sandbags and using backup generators, the company was able to keep the lights on and the profits flowing, even while the city was inundated by a 3-meter storm surge and hospital schools The subway and most other services were forced to close. If you imagine this picture as the world and the Goldman Sachs building as the gilded realm inhabited by the world's super rich and the political class that serve them, all you'd need to add is some heavily armed guards around the building, and you'd get a pretty good sense of what's ahead. Our rulers' apparent lack of concern about climate change is a ruse. They hope that if they can just head off dissent long enough, they will succeed in building this future brick by brutal brick, and there will be nothing the rest of us can do about it. We need to fight for something different, a system in which our economy isn't just a destructive machine grinding up human and natural resources to create mega profits for the rich, one in which the productive life of society is managed collectively by those who do all the work, where decisions are made not in the interest of private profit, but in the interest of human need. We need socialism, and the fight for it is the great challenge of our generation. Boom. At stake is nothing less than the world itself. What a perfect ending to this article. That's exactly right, and that's exactly why the powers that be are dead set against any socialism taking root or any more progressive leaders taking office, as seen by Jeremy Corbyn's defeat recently in the UK elections, as seen by the fact that this supposed impeachment of Trump is actually a ruse by the Democrats, because they all really actually support what Trump is doing. Most of them, at least the Democratic establishment, they would rather see Trump win than Bernie. And this is absolutely true. Anyways, to finish up this video, let's go to a little bit about that. So they have decided to bring articles of impeachment up against Trump. I don't really need to go, read this article. This is just a headline. They've decided to do this, and they've got everybody whipped up. Everybody who's a Democrat or a liberal is like, yeah, get him. We've got him now. And the whole media has created this whole thing. I'm just trying to indicate to some people who, think that this is a smart thing to do, a reasonable thing to do, and that this is actually some kind of real resistance against Trump. Anybody who thinks that, please disavow yourself of that thought or that, that thinking. Okay. It's just turn off CNN and turn off MSNBC. They are just trying to, well, let me read this tweet by Llama Baraka. Llama Baraka was the vice presidential candidate for the Green Party in the last election. And I follow him on Twitter, and incredible, politically savvy person. Anyways, I'm going to read this tweet. Folks, you are being played with this impeachment show. The deals have been cut. Trump wins. No digging into Biden. Both sides get something, and those of you who think the Democrats are doing something noble get your fix. But it's a sham meant to sheepdog you back to the system. This is exactly right. So they're trying to bring up these articles of impeachment, and everybody's like, yeah, rule of law. Oh, you can't let him go any further. They know he's going to get defeated in the Senate. That's why this doesn't make any sense. They're handing Trump a win. They make him look stronger. On top of that, they take the progressive candidates out of the race. Bernie and Warren will have to sit in the Senate trial in January. Which may or may not affect what happens to them in the very early primary states, right? Because those states are very important, because if you get out on a good foot, they don't always indicate who's going to win, but if you get out on a good foot, it's very helpful. Yeah, they just, and the charges are bullshit. And I'm going to show you why they're bullshit. They're like, we got him, and Sondland and all these people, like, they had this incredibly, he was done. Okay, this is what CNN and MSNBC don't show you, how stupid this is. This is from Jimmy Dore. I'm just going to roll a little tape just from this.
Trying to be very clear about was President Trump never told me directly that the aid was tied to that statement.
But in that same conversation you had with him about the aid, about the quid pro quo, he told you that President Zelensky had to, quote, clear things up and do it in public, correct?
I did not have a conversation with him about the aid. I had a conversation with him, as referenced in my text, about quid pro quo.
Well, the quid pro quo you were discussing was over the aid, correct?
No. President Trump, when I asked him the open-ended question, as I testified previously, what do you want from Ukraine? His answer was, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. Tell Zelensky to do the right thing. That's all I got from President Trump.
Yeah. So, they don't show you that footage on MSNBC or on CNN. There's no quid pro quo. There's no smoking gun. None of the Ukrainian people who were involved, they were like, nobody said anything. Like, nobody was pressuring us. Nothing. This is bullshit, man. And a lot of people are like, yeah, running across the green field of impeachment. Like, here we go. We got him now. And you guys are going to run into a fucking brick wall. And when he's, exonerated and cleared and, Trump wins the election in 2020, everybody's going to be like, what happened? Just like in 2016, whenever, everybody was like, Hillary's going to win. There's no way Trump is going to win. No way. Because it was wall to wall. Hillary's got him. Hillary's way in the lead. Trump isn't a crazy person. Trump's a lunatic. There's no possible way. And then the brick wall was election day. What happened? What happened was you fucking watched CNN and MSNBC, you lunatics. Oh, sorry. What happened was you watch CNN and MSNBC too much. You need to turn that shit off. Turn Rachel Maddow off. Whatever. I can name all the anchors, but I'm not going to. Turn it off. This is why alternative news is really, really important to your brain. That's all I have for you in this video. Thank you so much for your time, your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. And thank you, to all of you who contribute to the channel. I really, really appreciate you. It always helps to continue doing this channel. Until next time. Oh, if you want to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.